friends! In this video we are going to learn how to make a slab pot. Now a slab pot is simply referring to a pot that has been built with a slab of clay. And a slab of clay is any kind of piece of clay that has been rolled out flat with something like a rolling pin or a slab roller. So we're going to start with our piece of clay that you received in your kit, and then I think the easiest thing to do is to go ahead and kind of turn it into a hamburger. This piece of clay is much harder than what you'll be working with. This one sat out and got a little bit drier than I normally would let it, so I'm gonna just wipe this down, but you probably won't need to do that to your new fresh piece of clay. All right, so I'll set it down on my surface, and for making a slab, it is nice that this surface is just a piece of plywood that's unfinished because my clay won't stick to it. If you are working on a countertop or something that your clay might stick to, you could just put out a t-shirt or a smooth towel that's kind of like flour sack or something like that, and use that. Just gonna roll it out like you would roll out cookie dough. There we go. And like I said, this piece is just a little bit drier than yours will be, so this is a step that you should be able to skip. When you're rolling out a slab, you want it to be able to get to be about a 1/4 inch thick. Maybe just a little tiny bit thicker than that, but definitely not too thin, because once it starts getting really thin, it makes it hard to work with. My table's kind of wobbly, so we're working with what we got during this little time at home. All right. My kitchen counters don't get quite this much light, so I thought it would be better to do this in front of a window. All right, so I've got this rolled out pretty flat. You can see it's about a 1/4 inch. All right, so right now it's kind of looking like a pie crust. So what I'm gonna do is just smooth it out a little bit where you could see the texture from the fabric, and then I've got an empty gift card, but you could use anything that's just got that flat surface, and I'm just smoothing the top out, and then I'll flip it over and do the same to this side. You could see where it got caught on a little wrinkle in the fabric. I don't think I'll end up really using that part, but if I was going to, I could just keep smoothing it out. Now, the cool thing about a slab built piece is that you can do it a few different ways. You can lean it, you can put it over a drape, I used this little bowl, and actually I did it on the inside to make this piece. And I'll show you how to do that in just a second, but that's, if you have something that's just like a round dome, you could lay it over that. It's really, you know, only limited by what you can find laying around. So one thing to remember when you are building inside or on top of another piece is that you don't want your clay to stick to what you're using as a mold. And so we'll come back to this towel. I can use it, or if you have like a coffee filter, really anything will work, just as long as there's something dividing the clay from the piece. And so what I'm doing is I'm just bending it. If I were to just push right now, I would pop through the clay. So that's why I'm just kind of slowly forming it. You can also, kind of like you're making a pizza crust, I'm just gonna put it right there and start just shaping the clay gently and slowly into a form that will fit into your bowl. Now, if you're doing it the other way, you could slump it on the outside of a bowl or something that you have your form. I'm doing it on the inside because of this lip right here. I'd rather not have that indent, although with the towel it probably still wouldn't be too bad. But maybe we'll start there. That'll be a nice beginning part. And let's see, yeah, that did leave that little indent and I didn't love that. All right, so I'll flip that over, put my little cloth back in there, and now we're looking like we might fit a little bit better inside our bowl. And I'm pinching these little edges and kind of pushing it down into the form that I want it to be in. And you could use a bowl, I'm just trying to think of all the things. You could, if you got one of the giant prize eggs at Easter, you could use that as a form to drape your piece over. Just your only guideline is that it needs to fit back in the container that you received it in. And the neat thing about that is that you could even use the container itself to make this shape. But so we've got it kind of squished in there. And now I'm just going to use, this is great because I can use the walls of the container to kind of press this clay against it and smooth it out. This is one of my favorite techniques for making especially like serving dishes and stuff like that when I'm not throwing on the wheel. All right, so you can see, I mean, just how quickly that kind of comes together. And then I'm gonna turn that so I can see what I'm doing on this side. So I've got all this extra that's like just hanging over the sides, which obviously you'd much rather have too much than, you know, push it in there and realize you're missing a wall because you didn't have a large enough piece of clay. So now I'm gonna use, I have just a little skewer, but you can use a toothpick or really anything. If you're a grown-up, you could use a steak knife or something like that if you wanted to cut it through, but the clay's so soft, this is really fine. And so I'm just going around and trying to kind of keep my thumb where I'm running the toothpick along. Maybe if I hold it to the side, you can see it. Yeah. See, I'm just cutting it apart so that I can then kind of tear it off. It's fine for it to be rough at this stage because we've still got plenty of smoothing to do, but something like this shape is nice, especially if you wanted to do and I'm gonna ball this up and just set it aside because I might use it to make a foot on this piece. And I'll just put it back in the bag so it doesn't dry out. But yeah, you could put little herbs and press them into this and then remove them, and that would leave a really pretty imprint. There's lots of different ways you could finish this bowl off. I'm just kind of smoothing the sides a little bit. I'm gonna finish pressing it there. I would let this stiffen up a little bit. You want it to get to dryness called leather hard. Right now the clay is plastic, which means it's really soft and workable, but it also might not be able to, you know, hold its shape if you take it out. And if you really like love the shape, or it's a more intricate shape, you'd want to let it get a little bit firmer. Leather hard clay can still bend slightly, but it's not it's not like butter soft. All right, so I'm gonna flip it out. Luckily for this demonstration, we started with a piece of clay that was already a little bit drier. And you can see it just took on the shape of what it was in. Now, these wrinkles in the tea towel made these impressions, and if you want it to be smooth, you can just gently work on smoothing that out. That's another thing that our little Target gift card is handy for. Sadly, I think it's empty. I normally spend those pretty quick when I get them. I don't know about you guys, but I am going through withdrawals. I have not been to Target since this whole thing started. Trying to stay home and hunker down. All right. I guess the good news for all of us is that we have fun projects to work on. There we go. And so you just keep smoothing until you get it just like you like it. For the sake of this video, that's about all I'm gonna do, but if I were working on it for myself, I would spend a little bit more time. Now, as far as cleaning up the edge of your piece, that top lip, I always just like to use a damp sponge, not soaking wet, because that'll just make a mess of your piece, but just damp, and just work it along the edge. Most things in hand building are just about repetition. I'm not doing it super hard, I'm just doing it over and over until I get the result I want. And now, again, if your clay is too soft and it's losing its shape, that is not a problem. You can just let it dry a little bit. You can also hit it with a hair dryer. Just be careful, you don't want to over dry it. You can also, if something comes up and you're working on a project but you need to go do something else, you can put it back in its little container, and if it's getting a little too dry, you can spray it with a little water bottle and put it back in its little container, and it'll sit fine. Just don't over wet it, because you don't want it to turn to mush in its airtight container. If they sit in a puddle of water, it does not do good things. There's also going to be a video that'll guide you through wedging the clay in the event that something goes awry and you just do not like what it ended up. You can always start over. That's the nice thing about clay, is that it's so forgiving, and you're never, you know, too far gone that you can't create something great with it. All right, so as far as the slab pot goes, this is pretty much it. I'll show you a few other examples of how you can join pieces together, and that's a great start to your very own slab pot. Thank you for creating with me, and be sure to check out my other tutorial videos. Feel free to send me any questions and photos of you and your family working on your Ember Ceramics at-home pottery kits.